19, for I have chosen him so that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring upon Abraham what he has spoken about him. What a beautiful thing. And listen, Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. Well, verse 2 tells us that the will of God is perfect. So if you ever come up with this idea as a man of God, I am sacrificing my family for the sake of the ministry, I will tell you, you are a bald-faced liar. You are sacrificing your family for the sake of the little kingdom you're trying to build. Because the will of God is perfect. That means I do not have to violate the will of God with regard to my family in order to fulfill the will of God with regard to the ministry. God doesn't need you. He does desire that you be obedient. That you be obedient. Now, I just want to give you two examples. Now, before, it's like when someone asked me one time, Brother Paul, are you against evangelism? I said yes and no. I'm not against biblical evangelism, but I'm against the way you're doing it. Are you against Sunday school and youth groups? Yes and no. I want to explain something to you. Now, for some of you, I'm not going to be enough, and for some of you, I'm going to be too much. I just want to use these two things to point out what's wrong with us. Sunday school. No matter what denomination you're a part of, if you are a part of some denomination that's kind of organized, I can assure you that your denomination spends multi-millions of dollars on Sunday school material. Multi-millions of dollars on conferences, on teaching teachers how to teach Sunday school, on doing everything in the book to promote Sunday school. I know that for a fact. Let me ask you, how much money does your denomination spend, and how many conferences and man-hours are put in to teach fathers to teach their children? So now you found it, haven't you? God doesn't have a plan B. He has a plan A. You circumvent plan A, plan B won't work. Now, I'm not saying that children can't come together in groups and be catechized or be taught or anything, but if that ever even begins to hint to supplant the ministry of the Father in the home, blow it to pieces. Do you see what I'm saying? Look at just that one tiny instance. Everything for Sunday school, everything for Sunday school. But there's hardly a conference in this entire country to teach men how to teach their children. And most of the time in the Sunday school, it's nothing more than entertainment, because the Sunday school teacher doesn't have the authority to discipline your child. And even if they did, they wouldn't do it because they don't believe in it. That's just one tiny instance. Let's look at youth groups. Well, youth need to be together. You know, they need to be together. Okay, well, let's look. Proverbs 13:20. He who walks with wise men will be wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. Whoever told you youth ought to be together? Whoever told you that? I'll tell you who told you that. 1960s. Psychologist. Generation gap. Youth are to be with adults so that they stop acting like naive fools and join adulthood and put away foolishness, which leads to destruction. Now, I'm not saying you can't bring youth together, but I submit if you do, have all their parents there. And you say, well, what about the lost youth that come into our church? Well, what are they seeing now? The lost youth come into your Christian youth in church, and they see almost the same thing they see in their own home. No parents, kids teaching kids. Or one guy a little bit older with mousse in his hair teaching your kids. But what would happen if lost youth came into your church and they saw the children there, the youth, in a loving, wonderful relationship collectively with their parents, and they would go, whoa, I've never seen anything like this before. His dad, look at him. He loves his dad. I mean, look at so is this Christianity? You see, my dear friend, let's say that I am no doctor, but a man comes up to me with a bleeding forehead and he says, Brother Paul, I've been everywhere. No one can diagnose my problem. And I said, well, I'm no doctor, but I'll follow you around for 24 hours. And I noticed that every time the hour strikes, if it strikes 1, he hits himself in the head with a brick 1 time. If it strikes 2, he hits himself in the head twice with a brick. If it strikes 12, he hits himself 12 times in the head with a brick. After observing this cautiously and carefully, taking notes for 24 hours, I come up to him and I say, you know, I think I have figured out your problem. I'm no doctor, but I think I figured out your problem. It is that pathetic among us, church. Why do our children do what they do? Why is everything? It's like one old dear saint, someone asked him one time, he wouldn't let his teenage son go out with a young lady to be in some private place. He said, don't you trust your son? He said, no, I don't trust my son. Whatever made you think that? I don't trust his dad. I wouldn't put his father alone with a woman that wasn't his wife. And yet I have much more to lose than a boy. I have much more control of my will than a teenager with raging hormones. So what would make you ever think I would do that? We violate biblical principle after biblical principle after biblical principle, and then we wonder why everything is a mess. Lastly, just real quick, turn with me. You know when I say real quick, I am speaking an allegory or something. Go to 1 Timothy. I was listening a few months ago at all the horrendous things that are happening to our, I don't know what you would call it anymore, republic, democracy, country, I'm not really sure. Socialistic state. And I was so burdened as I sat there listening, and I was saying, oh God, what can I do? Right now, Lord, I honestly, with all that is in me, I'll jump in the middle of the fire. There's a charging rhino, I'll jump in front of it. Just tell me what to do. Do you want me to go to Washington and just stand in front of the White House and preach till they throw me in jail? I'm tired of just preaching to Christians and in churches and all this. God, just the country's going to hell. Just throw me. Just what do you want me to do? Just throw me at them. Verse 1 of chapter 4, but the Spirit explicitly says that in latter times some will fall away from the faith, 1 Timothy 4:1, paying attention to deceitful spirits and doctrines of demons. Now, he goes on to basically tell young Timothy that all hell's going to break loose in culture. That everything is just going to be maddening. Men as beasts. I was with Conrad Mbewe a few months ago, and I heard him preach. They call him the Spurgeon of Africa, and rightly so. If you get a chance to listen to him, listen to him. He's one of my favorite preachers in the world. And he said this. He said, in Africa, we no longer fear beasts. We don't run from beasts. We fear men and run from men. He was talking, of course, about depravity. But he said here that just the world's going to come unglued, Timothy. Now, what does he say to do? Verse 6, in pointing out these things to the brethren, you will be a good servant of Jesus Christ, constantly nourished on the words of faith. And right there, this text just started unraveling for me. Paul, yeah, the world has lost its mind. Everything is going to happen. It's under my providence. But listen to me. Here should be your reaction in the midst of all hell breaking loose, in the midst of apostasy, in the midst of persecution. Here's what you need to do. Be constantly nourished on the words of faith. We always want to run out there and do something. We want to fix something. God is seeking men of character, polished swords. First of all, son, be constantly nourished on the words of faith and the sound doctrine which you have been following. This